guys, welcome to Go Men podcast for men. It was designed originally from Go Ministry International. And so today, my guest is Rob Nelson.
Hey, Phil.
Of God Just Wins. Yeah,
Yes,
hey,
sir.
what's happening, Rob? Rob's an old friend of mine. I've known over 20 years, all the way back to, Saddleback Church.
Right.
And I met Rob recently. Somebody invited him to the beach walk. And I looked up, I heard the voice, and went, Rob Nelson from the radio?
Right.
And we started sharing stories, and
Yeah.
you have God Just Wins is your nonprofit ministry. And can you fill the guys in on what that is, God Just Wins?
Yeah. It's a great story in how it was given birth and then just the opportunities that are unfolding with it. So it started with my son going into the military, and the precursor. My son and I, we talk every day. He gets into this military track. He has mission and vision on what he is going to do. But during boot camp, the first 90 days, no contact whatsoever. He's fine with it. It's a huge disruptor in my life. I'm just spinning because I have no contact. And so what I chose to do was write a note to him every day. And what we learned after the fact was there's some of his teammates that would maybe get a letter a week or a letter a month or no mail at all. And so they pulled Tate aside and said, how about if you just run a debrief in the morning and read us your dad's letter? And the letters that I wrote were just on three elements: optimism, hope, and encouragement. And so it started there. I put it on one of the social media platforms just because it would be public facing. No intent behind it, no design other than, okay, it's facing forward. And in the first 2 months, it grew an audience that was reaching 1.8 million people around the world. And so what it told me was how thirsty our world is
For
optimism, hope, and encouragement.
Right.
And it's just continued to blossom from there, just these concentric circles of different opportunities that have emerged that are all in that who would have thought.
That's amazing. And
kind of campaign.
And Tate just isn't your regular run-of-the-mill, and I'm not diminishing anybody in the service, but he's not your typical service guy.
He's regular Joe.
Yeah, he's not.
Yeah, and it's interesting because no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, I've never crossed paths with anybody where I extended my hand and said, gosh, I'd like to give you some optimism, hope, and encouragement. And they've waved me off saying, no, I have enough of that. No more for me.
Oh, my gosh.
But especially in this time where there's just such a high level of toxins.
Yes.
Politically, socially, culturally, militarily.
Yes.
There's just conflict everywhere, and people are drowning in it.
100%.
And I think as they drown, they come up and burst the surface and gulp for something positive. And so that's really the whole premise of the platform, is to extend this message of hope and really retrain people to look at what's right instead of staring at what's wrong all the time.
I've heard that one negative comment for a human being, it takes typically 6 positives to hear to diminish that one negative they hear. And to your point, it's a desert out there, and people don't get that kind of encouragement all the time. Now, you are on K-Wave Radio, correct?
Yeah, we have a program on K-Wave called the Minute of Encouragement, and it's another God story on how K-Wave got a hold of the content. They wanted to extend this message of encouragement, and so now they're broadcasting that every day at K-Wave, and also on 1110 AM down in San Diego.
That's
so
awesome.
We cover the Southland, all of Southern California, with a daily message of hope and encouragement.
Oh, man, that's so great to hear. As we were walking on the beach walk, you started sharing some stories with me, and I don't know if you're wanting to do this or not, but, we're pretty raw and real. You and I have been very close, and I'm wondering if maybe you can share a little bit of, you had a horrific story in your life, and it made me cry. It'll probably make me cry again. But most men and women would have walked away from God or divorced their wife. Things would have happened that everyone would have went, well, of course, sure, I get it. But you drew closer to Jesus. You drew closer to God. You drew closer to your wife. Can you share a little bit of that with me?
Yeah, sure. And I think...
Not with me, but with the men.
Yeah, what's crazy is that you start your married life. We all start the same way. You're at the altar. The world is your oyster. You're in what I describe as breacher mode. You're ready to kick down doors and capture life, and there's no chance of failure. There's nothing but success on the horizon. And we kind of set our I-dos with that same intention. Life is nothing but good up until it's not. And we were the typical family. I used the acronym sitcom, single income, 2 children, overwhelming mortgage, just finding our way through life. And that's how it was. And we have 2 kids. And as they aged up, life began to intercede. And ultimately, life got in the way. Our daughter was raped. And as a 16-year-old, and what so many girls and women do when they're sexually assaulted, she had tried to go it alone. And it's Satan's recipe.
Yes.
It's directly from Satan, whether it's shame or guilt or fear or trauma, whatever is the mix of ingredients, this go it alone mindset seeps in. And we found out about her assault in the craziest way, where I'm down on my laptop in the kitchen of our home. Our daughter is up on her laptop talking to a friend or whatever chat. And this friend lived overseas and was asking her, hey, how's your summer? What she was responding in this chat was scrolling across my screen.
Oh, wow.
How was your summer? My daughter replies, not so good. I was raped.
Yikes.
And in that moment, life stops. Yeah. And I didn't know how to respond. I mean, there was these flashpoints of this can't be. This message couldn't possibly be my daughter at the keyboard. And so we confronted her with it. I took a screenshot and showed it to her, and I said, sweetheart, we got to talk. What's going on? And it triggered at that point all the PTSD. And she was actually hospitalized in its severity. She was in the hospital for 21 days, lost 17 pounds, didn't have 17 to give away. But it created this foundation that she was relaunching from. And so she began to regain momentum, back at school, back at work, reconnecting with friends. During this time, social media is not her friend. Social media is launching some of the most vicious attacks on that she was whoring herself for drugs, and that she was a prostitute, and that she was this and she was that. And so all of those toxins were seeping in. But what our team said that was around us, counselors and physicians and nurses and mentors and friends and family, was that Haley was on the road to recovery. It's a long road, but on the road. And so we were just journeying through that together. And up until she came home from meeting friends one evening, and she was upset. She was, crying. My wife went in and sat with her, and there's always that confusion of, okay, is this teenage drama or is this teenage trauma?
Right.
And but ultimately they were talking together, and finally my daughter said to my wife, I'm fine. Let's go to sleep. So 11:30 or so at night. Around 12:30 in the morning, I wake up and I hear all this wrestling around downstairs in our house. And I go downstairs, and there's our daughter, and she's waving her hands across the wall. And it happened to be a wall with our wall of fame, all of our family pictures. Sure. And so the frames are clanking around. Haley, what are you doing? And she was lucid, but she was hallucinating.
Got it.
And so it became evident, what's going on? And so with that, she said that somebody gave her something. What is it? I don't know. Off to the hospital we go. And so it started this journey where we began this fight for life. By the time we got to the hospital, she went from lucid to unable to talk and unable to get up out of the car. And we spent the next 12 hours that evening, all through the night, but into the next day, where physicians were interceding. They're doing their testing. They're doing their diagnostics. And they're giving us assurance. Okay, there's something going on in her system, but she's stable, and we just need to wait this out. The next morning, I go home. My wife comes down to the hospital, and I'm just picking up our son and then driving back in. And as we're walking across the parking lot, we get the phone call. And it's my wife. And she announces frantically, Haley's vitals just crashed. Get up here. What do you mean her vitals just crashed? Oh, man. She was stable, and we're just going through this system of recovery, this process of recovery. So the next few hours was this tug of war, where the medical group around her would stabilize her, and then she would crash, and stabilize her and crash. And ultimately it led to the physicians that next evening, the lead doctor coming to us, and the words just echo in my mind every time I share this. But she said these words, Mom, Dad, it's time for us to talk.
Oh, boy.
And so she announced that our daughter was gone, that they would keep her alive artificially for as long as we want. But they've done everything they could. They don't understand what was going on in her body, in her system, and that she was gone. And so in that moment, we made the choice of taking her off all of the artificial equipment and handing her to Jesus. And so life changes.
Yes.
We cratered in. We crashed in every way possible, emotionally, financially, physically. I would say spiritually, but we didn't crash spiritually. I later learned, when you have a loss of this magnitude, any losses of high magnitude, but of this level of trauma, grief ebbs and flows.
Yes.
You go from where you can actually stand up and walk to other moments where you're just collapsed, belly down on the ground, tears and stuff flowing from you, and you're just gasping for air. And I had one of those moments, and I was with a friend of mine, and I kept repeating the words, I can't believe God expects me to handle my daughter dying in the arms of her father. Can't believe he expects me to handle my daughter dying in the arms of her father. And I said it, and I said it, and I said it. And then finally, my friend, she says, stop. Listen to your own words. Your daughter died in the arms of her father. Okay, yes, she died in your arms, but she died as you handed her off in the arms of her father, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And it reframed life for us. Didn't remove trauma, didn't take away grief, but it gave us perspective of our daughter is exactly where we prayed her to be.
Yes.
In the arms of Jesus, just out of turn.
You shared with me one time that, Phil, you have no idea the grief that I had. It was, I couldn't even walk. I would shuffle my feet around the block. But yet, by the grace of God, there were men in my life that helped me through this.
Yeah.
Share a little bit of that.
And it's a powerful testimony, and it really underscores what we're now doing with Go Ministries and the Beach Walk, and getting men together to link arms and to soldier through life. Life is not easy. It's going to turn you upside down, as it did myself, my wife, my son. We grieved in a mighty way and continue to grieve in mighty ways, but we grieve in a way where it's productive, not destructive. And there was early on, when I talk about being reduced emotionally, physically, all of these different elements. We were at our home, and a pal of mine said, "Hey, let's go for a walk around the block." Walk around the block is, when you're walking, is maybe, 4 or 5 minutes tops.
Sure.
Yeah. Could barely stand. I physically barely had the capacity to stand up. I couldn't lift my feet, and they would shuffle on the ground, and literally 6 inches in front of the next, and 6 more inches, shoes scraping on the ground. And that 4 or 5 minute walk around the block was like an hour. But it confirmed that this wasn't a Rob or my wife Deborah or my son Tate a go it alone exercise.
Right.
This was this community of people that surrounded us and that continue to surround us. I have 10 men that surround me that are not only there to hold me up in those moments where I collapse, but to lead, guide, and direct. And as I often say, to get in my kitchen when stupid finds me. And so it does,
I
right?
love that
And
comment.
that's true with all men. There's
Yeah.
stupid finds men.
Oh, all day.
Yeah, all day, every day.
Every
and
day,
so
yeah.
in those moments, they have permission to course correct. and they also have authority not to be nice about it. But this is what is required to get through today's life, whether it's something as traumatic as the loss of a child or any other challenge in life. You need your troop, your
Yes.
platoon, your
Yes.
group of men around you in order to lead, guide, and direct and course correct when you're in the right.
You gave me a statistic once about husbands and wives after losing a child.
Yeah.
What the percentage was that stayed together. Share that with the men, but also, how are you and Deb doing?
Yeah, it's a great story. I'll tell 2 things. One is the statistic. It's awful. When you lose a juvenile child to suicide, which is ultimately what happened. Haley had taken her life. She got tricked by Satan. It triggers a 93% divorce rate and just
Yikes.
implodes marriages. And so it's Satan's work.
Yes.
It's Satan wielding this sword
it's a
where
way to
it's not
divide
just
you.
one person lost.
Right.
It just
Explodes.
and ripples through
Right.
families and rips apart families. And so I tease Deborah. We've been married 34 years now.
Congratulations.
Tell her that a reminder that it's 34 years of pure bliss, and she rolls her eyes. But we have a marriage that is succeeding, and it's defying the statistics. And in an environment where statistically marriage is being treated like an auto lease. Husband and wife, they're going to ride it 36,000 miles, and then they're trading
Trade it in. Yeah.
and getting something younger, newer, faster, right? And so,
My wife got the raw end of that deal.
these long-term marriages, but somehow, some way, I'm still sleeping indoors, and it's because we have this focus not on our own ability or our own strength and courage and boldness. It's founded on collapsing into Jesus and knowing that our daughter is there, right there with
Let me just say, amen to that. Just to say what you said, it takes a real big man to do that. It takes a real big man to keep walking with Jesus through this adversity, to stay married and love your wife like you do. I know you do. Love your son like I know you do. You're sending me pictures of, you shooting a 600-pound elk with your son in Montana. I mean, I know you love him dearly. I don't know what I would have done. Okay, my first initial reaction is I'd go find out who did it, and no one would ever know what happened to him or where he's at. Then Jesus comes back in and says, no, hey, wait a minute. So not only are you big in stature at 6'6", I want you guys to know that. I'm not that little, okay? I'm 6 feet tall. He's 6'6". But having had such an amazing life, being a tennis pro, having played in Wimbledon, being successful and having all this happen, to now it's just like, hey, I want to help people find Jesus. I want to be a sign. I want to be a neon sign that points to Jesus. I love that about you.
And it's really how we feel commissioned in our own ways. Deborah just yesterday was meeting with a woman that lost her son just 4 weeks ago. It's an ability, a God-given ability that she has that I don't. She's a first responder that can go sit with these moms and dads and sisters and brothers and be face-to-face with that trauma that's so raw and real. I don't have that ability. But that's how her hope, optimism, and encouragement come out. Yeah. Our son is made that same choice of taking that trauma, and he's been traumatized without question, but taking that trauma and pointing it towards something productive.
Yes.
And his commission, he feels like he's been commissioned to defend those that can't defend themselves, to protect those that can't protect themselves.
Wow.
And I'm certain that's grounded in his experience, his life experience with his sis. Yeah. And then for me, extending those three things, optimism, hope, and encouragement. Yes. It's not something that I feel anything less than sent in by God. My number got called. Go do this.
Yes.
And so we're just following that. And it's emerging with our family intact, our marriage intact, our faith intact.
100. This is something that I can go on and on with you. Let's wind it up with this one answered question. I'm going to ask it. Could you have done this without men in your life supporting you? Maybe you could have, but where would you have been? Where would you have ended up? Or better yet, what would you recommend to the men listening right now? If something like that happened to them in their life, how should they be prepared for something like that?
Yeah, and I think that the only way to prepare is to proactively have engagement and have that infrastructure in place, because life is unpredictable.
Yeah.
But it's impossible. There were times where I simply did not have capacity to barely breathe. And there's men that stepped in and women as well that nurtured our family. They embraced my son when I was compromised and couldn't do certain roles as a father. And so men surrounded my son.
Oh, that's awesome.
And nurtured and cared for him and loved on him.
Yeah.
And so, no, there's zero chance of survival in this go it alone. This mindset of if it's going to be is up to me is pure baloney.
Right.
Not possible.
No, it isn't.
So whatever life circumstance brings, and life will come at you without question. It's just a question of timing.
Yeah.
You have to know that there's men behind you. The only way to survive.
Agreed. That's the whole purpose of Go Ministry International. That was the whole purpose of our walks, the beach walk, the Ladera walk. There may be one forming in the East Coast. And more than that, it's just that men, as iron sharpens iron, so does one another. And what does that mean? Well, sparks fly sometimes. But you know what? To be able to call another man, to be able to walk with that man through a process. The verse is isolating. That's exactly what Satan would have wanted. He basically opened the roof of your home and dropped a grenade and said, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And the shrapnel flew. I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I'm so happy how you've walked through it as God's man. So, guys, thank you for joining us on Go Men, sponsored by Go Ministry International. And Rob, you're such a good friend. What a pleasure to have you on my show.